assigned to the violent crimes unit and investigations, and also assigned as one of the supervisors for the Antioch gang unit. And I have my partner here.
I'm Corporal Rick Hoffman with the Antioch Police Department. I am currently assigned to the Patrol Division as a police corporal, and I'm also one of the supervisors on Antioch Police Department gang unit.
Hi, my name is Delehunt, Deputy District Attorney. I work with a team that's actually in the room that I'll introduce later. And I do a lot of our community outreach work and specifically deal with our issues of truancy and chronic absenteeism.
Outstanding. So this panel is called Gangs and Community Violence. And as you know, early in this morning we had an overview on youth programming. We had our Parks and Recs director give us an overview along with the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Contra, Costa County, and Donnie Imai from the Antioch Unified School District to talk about extended programs throughout our community, or the limitation of extended programs here in Antioch. And so that was just to frame our overview of youth programs and to get an understanding. And then we went into panel discussions that had to do more around needs assessment. Not necessarily that we're gathering very specific data, but just merely empirical as to what we see. So we've had some school principals talk about their experiences with before and after school programs and the needs that they have. And we've also had faith leaders from our community come and talk about youth programs and what they see as needs missing in our community. And so now we're going to gangs and community violence, and we've asked Deputy District Attorney Delehunt to talk about her area, which has to do with juveniles. And she also oversees truancy, if I remember correctly. And we also wanted our police department here to talk about specifically about gangs in the community. I recently completed the Citizens Academy, and I was blown away after I asked the question specifically dealing with kind of the average age of gang members in our community. It was between 14 and 19 years old. So I think this is a critical panel in terms of truly understanding the needs that our youth have, so that they don't end up with you and then end up being prosecuted by the DA's office. We have to keep our kids here in the community. And so this is part of understanding that and what how we're really thinking through public safety for the community. So at that, I will leave it up to you as to who should go. I think the police should go first because it's a natural evolution into then the DA's office. So how you want to split your time? You each have about maybe 8 minutes. So if you want to combine that
So yeah, we're going to combine ours.
Okay.
This is more of just an overview of the gangs that we have in our city, and then along with some of the things that we've done to kind of eradicate some of the gangs. Unfortunately, we'll never, ever, ever get rid of gangs completely. It's just they've been around for longer than we've all been alive in this room, and they'll be around, unfortunately, probably after we're all long gone. So this is just an overview of what we have going on here.
Sergeant, and when you talk, if you can kind of project your voice so that we can capture it here.
Try not to be on Facebook.
Yeah.
You can run, but you can't hide.
So we'll go over briefly. This is usually a 4-hour block of instruction, sometimes longer, that myself or Sergeant Stenger will put together. But we are condensing that down to about roughly 20 minutes. So we're going to kind of fly through some of these. But as you would know, Councilman Thorpe, as we went from the Citizens Academy, a gang, as it's defined in the penal code, is a group of 3 or more members that identify by a common name, common sign, or common symbol, and they commit one of a number of criminal acts, basically, as their primary activity. So here we just have some examples of some gang members identifying with common names, signs, or symbols. And then from here we'll move on, and we're just going to go over briefly some of the more prominent gangs that we have here in the city of Antioch. So probably the gang that we have the most membership of and the most problem with would be the Norteño Criminal Street Gang, which is a gang that has been around for quite a long time and has various different subsets within the city. Probably the oldest subset that we have would be a subset which is known by CAL. They have been around since about the early 90s. They started in the city of Pittsburgh, and now they are kind of all over the place, even in Antioch as well. And we have here a couple examples of some CAL members identifying with their name, signs, or symbol. And after this, the next subset that we would move on to would be,
there's about 100 members in the Crazy Ass Latinos throughout eastern Costa County.
yeah, it is definitely the largest Norteño subset that we have, at least in this area, and definitely the oldest. The next, probably oldest subset that we have, at least in Antioch, is a gang by the name of Elite Northern Empire, or E&E. They've been around since the late 90s, roughly. It started between, after an internal split between themselves and some CAL members, and now E&E has been around for quite a while as well. And again, some more examples of some E&E members displaying their name, signs, or symbol. Another more prominent Norteño affiliated gang. They're not a traditional subset like some of these other ones, but some of their members are associated and affiliated with the Norteño street gang, would be the Bully Boys crew. They associate with West Boulevard in Pittsburgh. They claim West Boulevard as their turf essentially, but a lot of West Boulevard members do also live in Antioch or commit crimes in Antioch, and we have contacted and arrested Bully Boys members for a long time. Trident Block, or Northern Cali Gangsters, another prominent street gang, Norteño affiliated street gang. They've been around for quite a while. They are originally from West Pittsburgh, or Trident Block basically, from West Pittsburgh. And intel that we have gathered over the last several years has been that leadership in this gang has actually taken over a leadership role over Norteños in the entire county. Goon Squad Norteños, GSN, they started around 2014 in the Sycamore Drive corridor in Antioch. They were younger associates of some other Norteño gang out of Concord. They began to function as a Norteño subset here in Antioch, and specifically they were claiming the Sycamore Drive corridor as their turf. We, as a gang unit, specifically targeted GSN for a couple of years because they were committing many acts of violence. They were victimizing the community. Many of them were suspects and responsibles in a variety of different crimes, from murders to assaults to robberies and things like that. And we targeted this gang pretty heavily over the last couple of years, and have, for the most part, almost eradicated their presence, at least from the Sycamore Drive corridor. West 19th Street Norteños. This is another local street gang out of Antioch, specifically from West 19th Street, hence the name, West 19th Street Norteños. It is believed that one specific West 19th Street gang member, which was essentially just a local street gang at the time, began to take over a leadership role over the gang, and began to associate the gang basically as Norteños. Essentially, they became a subset of the Norteño street gang over time, and now we believe they are a fully functioning Norteño subset, and we know them to carry out many acts of violence, and a lot of the members have been arrested for drug sales and acts of violence. They are another subset that we targeted specifically and heavily over the last couple of years because their membership were out there committing several different acts of violence, and we were successful in getting a lot of the more prominent, more violent members off the street. East Bay Riders, or EBR, this is a subset that began in the mid-2000s. Their members are very active. A lot of their membership, again, you'll see a common theme. A lot of them were very violent. A lot of them were suspects and responsible for acts of violence, including murder, assaults with deadly weapons, shootings, and things like that. They were another subset that we targeted very heavily as a gang unit and as an investigations unit for several years, and were successful in a lot of their membership who were responsible in shootings and murders and things like that being arrested and off the street. Lone Tree Norteños, LTN, this is a gang that we, over the last couple of years, have become more knowledgeable of their presence, I should say. We've learned that they started around 2012 to 2013 with some younger Norteño gang members. They have been very active, and our investigations have led us to identify a number of their members who have been responsible, again, for acts of violence and drug sales and things like that. And they have been a target of our gang unit for a couple of years because of the acts of violence that they've carried out, and we have been very successful in at least getting some of the more violent members off the street. Operation Delta Breeze, really briefly, Operation Delta Breeze was a wiretap case that the Antioch Police Department worked in conjunction with the Safe Streets Task Force. The case agent from Antioch PD was then Detective Cook, now Sergeant Cook with the Antioch Police Department. It was a wiretap case that was involving many different prominent Norteño gang members from Antioch and throughout the county that were selling large quantities of drugs and also suspects in violent crimes. Like I said, it involved many Norteño criminal street gang members, methamphetamine and drug trafficking. There was an extensive wiretap case that took a couple of months, and we were able to successfully get several members federally indicted. It was a very successful operation. So the Sureño Street Gang, they are a rival to the Norteño Street Gang. They are not as large as the Norteños that we have in Antioch, but they do have a significant presence. Probably the oldest and largest Sureño subset that we have would be LMT, or Los Monkeys Trece. They believe to have been started in Brentwood in the late 80s, and their membership still goes to this day. They have documented contacts with Pittsburgh PD since the late 80s, and we do believe that they are the largest Sureño subset in East County. LTS, Little Town Sureños, they began in Bay Point around 2001 after another Sureño from another subset wanted to start a subset in West Pittsburgh, essentially. They have expanded to Antioch, or they did expand to Antioch a few years later. The Little Town comes from the fact that they are from Brentwood, or I'm sorry, from Pittsburgh, West Pittsburgh, Antioch, so they call themselves Little Town for that reason, Little Town Sureños. And I think you had something to add about LTS, about how we targeted them a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we targeted them very, very hard, and we actually don't see any more Little Town Sureños around. So we pretty much eradicated them they committed a lot of murders throughout the eastern Contra Costa County, and a lot of them are in custody for actually murder. So we've got rid of a lot of those guys.
So we'll move on to East County black gangs. And these, a lot of these gangs had a significant presence in the Sycamore Drive corridor, and we'll kind of get into what we went and what we did as a gang unit in targeting these members. So the first one that we'll go over briefly is Broad Day. They came from the Low Mob Street Gang from the El Pueblo housing projects in Pittsburgh. Essentially, Low Mob can trace its roots back to that housing projects, back to the I want to say the mid to late 90s, and essentially around 2000 and around the early to mid 2000s, a lot of Low Mob members began to move to Antioch, essentially, and they began to claim the Sycamore Drive corridor as an extension of their turf. Basically, they began to claim Sycamore as an extension of the El Pueblo housing projects. Essentially, a feud began between Low Mob members and a group that they called out of towners, essentially in the Sycamore Drive corridor. So gang members from Oakland, Richmond, San Francisco, and things like that, who were also living in the Sycamore Drive corridor, began to feud with these Low Mob members. They began to commit acts of violence against each other, and these guys, specifically Low Mob, they began to commit acts of violence in broad daylight, hence the name Broad Day. They use it as a way to project to the community and to their rivals that they were not afraid to commit acts of violence in broad daylight, essentially. So we targeted that gang really heavily because they were committing a lot of acts of violence in the Sycamore Drive corridor. We were successful in getting a lot of them charged with murder, assault with deadly weapons, things like that, and a lot of their membership is gone from Sycamore Drive. This gang, they go by Clapshit. They were originally known as K&I, which was a street gang that was in the Sycamore Drive corridor. They did heavy recruiting, especially with younger kids. We had reports back, I want to say 2010, 2011, where young kids were being forced to join K&I, and if they did not join K&I, then them and their families were being targeted for acts of violence, essentially. So this gang, ultimately over the years, evolved into what it's known now as Clapshit, and they have an alliance now with Broad Day because they have a common enemy in a gang known as BDK, or Broad Day Killers, which we'll go over here in a second. But these gangs, Broad Day and Clapshit, they originally aligned with each other around 2009 to 2011. They did have some type of falling out for an unknown reason, but then around 2016 and 17, the two gangs realigned, and now they're basically calling themselves BDKS and things like that to show that there is an active functioning alliance between the two gangs. They were targeted by the Safe Streets Task Force, the FBI Safe Streets Task Force, a wiretap operation. 8 members of the gang were arrested after the investigation for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, pimping, dissuading a witness, possession of firearms, possession of high-capacity magazines, and gang enhancements. So it was a very successful wiretap investigation. So Broad Day Killers, BDK, this was a group that was essentially at war in the Sycamore Drive corridor with Broad Day, Lamar. They began due to a conflict arising between the two gangs. Essentially, this was a gang that was known as the out-of-towners because they were essentially from other cities, Richmond, Oakland, San Francisco. A lot of them were not homegrown from Antioch or Pittsburgh. Many BDK members began to call themselves other names like EBK, KSK, and Rowdy Gang, and things like that. They were calling themselves all kinds of names, but everyone kind of associated with the name Broad Day Killers because they had a common enemy in Broad Day, essentially. So we targeted this gang very heavily. This was, in my opinion, I worked a long-scale investigation against this gang for a year personally, and they, in my opinion, were one of the most violent, if not the most violent gang that we had in Antioch for quite a while. We worked a wiretap investigation again, along with the FBI Safe Streets Task Force. I was a case agent on it, along with FBI Special Agent Sanchez, and it was a year-long investigation. We identified many of the most prominent and most violent members of BDK. We specifically did a wiretap investigation for 3 months, from August to October 2016. We also did, if you want to go to the next one, we also did a lot of undercover gun buys using the ATF. Essentially, we identified a BDK member who we knew was selling a lot of firearms, essentially. We were able to secure ATF to come to Antioch and to essentially buy these guns in undercover capacity from this BDK member. So through all our efforts, through these undercover gun buys, through the wiretap investigation, and through all the other stuff that we did as a gang unit, we were able to get a lot of these members indicted, arrested, and charged and off the streets for a variety of different crimes. So briefly, we're kind of coming at the end. FOE, or Family Over Everything, they began around 2012 in the Hudson Court Apartments, 3421 Hudson Court. Many of their members were young, but they were actively committing crimes inside the complex and victimizing people who lived there. They were robbing people and things like that. They're still around today, and we believe that they do have an ongoing feud with Norteño street gangs for whatever reason. But again, this was a gang that we did target for a while, and a lot of their more older, more prominent members are currently incarcerated. Some other black gangs with an Antioch presence, Kumi 415, Prison Gang, and a variety of different gangs from North Richmond or Richmond and Oakland, San Francisco. And briefly, some East County white gangs. Really, the only two that we have functioning out here in any capacity are the Cocoa Boys or FAME, Family Affiliated Irish Mafia. They're not as structured as you would see out of some of the other Hispanic or black gangs. A lot of them don't really have a type of formal structure, except for the fact that many of them do have a white supremacist view. They're associated throughout East County. They deal mainly with narcotic sales and distribution, but they don't claim street corners or anything like that, or turf areas a lot of times like you would see from other gangs. And here's some example of some of their tattoos. That's basically it.
And we're here for questions.
Well, we've got plenty of questions, but we'll hand it over to our assistant DA, and then we'll open it up to questions.
So good afternoon, Laura Delehunt, Deputy District Attorney. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we deal with and that our office is concerned with, and then also a lot of the community outreach work that we're doing with youth. We try to focus a lot on prevention for the reasons that I think you just saw. Some of the trends that we're seeing, and then what we're trying to do to alleviate those problems in our county, and especially in Antioch. So I'm going to start a little bit talking about our truancy issue in this county. Truancy meaning that these are the kids. These are the kids who are missing 10% more of the school year. So what that means is if there's been 60 days of school, a student who misses 6 days is considered chronically absent. We have a huge problem in our county with truancy. And you just saw a lot of slides of gang members. We work a lot, and when I say we, I'll introduce you to my team members who are in the room today as well. We work a lot, specifically actually in Antioch. We have gone to pretty much every middle school in Antioch, every high school in Antioch. We have a very robust violence prevention program where we bring a team into the schools, and we talk about, we even have brought representatives from the police departments to talk about gangs, to talk about a variety of things, to instill in our kids other alternatives and ways that they can demonstrate their power in the community other than joining gangs. Just to highlight, one of the biggest issues that I think we still have in Antioch and throughout the county is this issue of our kids not attending. We have one of the highest in the state in Contra Costa County truancy rates. In some areas of our county, it's about 50%. In Antioch, it's around 40%. So that means that percentage of students are not attending school. And that is a huge problem we have. Among our elementary school students in Contra Costa County, we've had the third highest in the state for quite some time in terms of the highest number or percentage of truant kids. So what that means is these are kids who are not getting educated, and it starts at the elementary school level. When we talk about the iceberg analogy, what we're talking about is what is causing those young kids especially to be truant. Because the kids who are truant in elementary school are the ones who aren't learning to read. They aren't learning very, very basic skills, and when they don't learn to read, they can't read to learn later. What that means is they won't fit in junior high school academically. And so they're going to look for other ways to, fit in. And oftentimes that means resorting to joining a gang or finding someone to do drugs with instead of going to school. Because going to school means I don't know how to read like my friends do. I don't fit in. I'm being bullied maybe because of my inability to learn, or those are the trends that we're seeing. And so those are the kids who we see joining our gangs and committing. We have a very high percentage of burglaries, residential burglaries that occur during the day by juveniles. Well, those are kids that should be in school, right? So a lot of these trends of violence are a result of our kids not getting educated. So that's one of our biggest concerns. Why are they not going? Our office has taken what we call a very holistic approach to truancy, and we found that that's the most effective model, so that we basically have created, some ways to address the parents of chronically absent elementary school students, because that's where it all starts. And some of the reasons for this, you'll see some of the statistics. Chronically absent students in kindergarten scored 20% lower in reading. These are kids that are much more likely to be suspended by 7th grade. And then we see those are the kids that are dropping out in high school. Those are the kids that we see resorting to crime to make money later on. So we feel like it starts very, very early in life. There's been a lot of studies about 3rd grade reading level predicting future success. The students who are not proficient in reading are 4 times more likely than other students to be a high school dropout if they can't read well in 3rd grade. And that's a huge, huge number. So, so when we see this trend, it occurs to us that we need to approach it from the front end. And so we created actually what we call a parent truancy court in our county. I should note before that, this is stuff that you probably already know. Go ahead. Dropouts earn less than graduates. These are our students who are 3.5 times more likely to be arrested. This is very important, 8 times more likely to be incarcerated or be victims of crime when they drop out of school. So there's a very, very real connection between getting an education and ending up either in county jail or prison or becoming a victim of crime. So this was the statistic I was talking about earlier. Police reported that 60% of juvenile crime occurs between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. on weekdays. A lot of those are burglaries, a lot of those are breaking into cars, all these things that are happening during the school day when they should be in school. More than 80% of our prisoners in this country were high school dropouts. So this is what I was talking about, the holistic supports that we're trying to put in place for the parents of the young kids who are chronically absent. We find that when a young child is chronically absent, there's something drastically going wrong in either that family or someone in that family. There's some form of dysfunction, whether that be a substance abuse issue or a parent who's simply overwhelmed, not able to kind of organize their life for a variety of crises that might be going on in their home. Maybe they're homeless, going from home to home. They don't have a stable living environment for their kids, and they may have a number of children that they're trying to care for, and the basic needs are barely being met. So one of the most successful things I think that we've done in the last few years to address this is create, and even though it sounds punitive, it's actually kind of the opposite of punitive, we've created a parent truancy court, where we send a letter to parents who have chronically absent elementary school students, which means basically under 12 years old. The parents are compelled to come to court, sit before the judge. I handle that calendar personally, interact with the parents, but also in that courtroom, and I mean literally in that courtroom, we have supports. So we have county behavioral mental health. We have the COPE organization, which is an organization that works with our young people. If you've all heard of First Five, they're part of that organization as well, works with families to provide counseling, the Triple P parenting, which has been a very successful evidence-based parenting class. And then we have the Lincoln Child Center as another support piece of that court. And I should note that for the Lincoln Child Center, we had to get a grant through the Longs Foundation, and it took a lot of effort and a lot of funding to even get them funded for the court. But those resource providers can then connect with those parents and those families to put in interventions that will hopefully alleviate some of those problems that are causing them not to be able to get their children to school. So that we can, instead of setting up those children for a life of, then being deliberately truant when they're teens, and then joining gangs when they're teens, or getting into some form of violence because they can't succeed academically, we're trying to address that at an earlier age. No, you're good. So our teen truancy court, this is when we're really, we're trying to get our kids to graduate, but what we see in the teen truancy court is this is when, unfortunately, a lot of times it's too late, because it's very hard. The older our kids get, the harder it is to get them to change their patterns and their behavior, and we all know that just from ourselves. We try to surround these students with supports as well, but I'm working on trying to make this a little bit more robust, and I think it's a little bit, I think it's appropriate for our discussion today because I've reached out to some other areas of our state just to kind of see what their counties have done for teens. We have a lot of teens in our teen court, and I think a lot of kids who are truant who don't fit into kind of the regular structure that we have in school, but they might have a vocation that they are really passionate about. So we have some students who can't necessarily get through the regular model, but they are brilliant at computers or being auto mechanics or culinary stuff. So there was actually a program called 1,000 Strong in Sacramento that their mayor actually spearheaded. And it's a mentoring program that creates kind of these vocational opportunities for students, especially in high school, where they're kind of struggling academically. Maybe they're truant, maybe they're not attending, but they might have one of these passions. And so it directs those students to a specific mentor, and they can do an internship. So they do the internship for a total of 300 days. They work also with the Chamber of Commerce. There's a bunch of different partners involved. but it's allowed them to get internships for about 300 students, and it's also in partnership with the school district. And so that's a model that I think would be amazing to implement in our county. It costs them about $750,000. But down the road, I think that it could even be done more economically than that. There's some other models out there. So in addition to this discussion about truancy and some of those ideas, I did want to introduce some of the ladies in the audience who, you can just stand up real quick. These ladies work with me. They're from our victim witness team in our office, and what we do, and feel free to mention anything I've forgotten, but what we do is we try to go into the schools. We actually, as I said, go into almost all the schools in Antioch at this point at one time or another. And we have a 6-week anti-violence program, one day every week with our middle school students. And during that program, we talk about bullying, we talk about human trafficking, we talk about domestic violence, we talk about gangs, obviously. Social media, right? Cyberbullying, social media, and we really try to show and create a different kind of relationship with law enforcement with these students. It's really successful. We go back every year, and we actually even have a program in our office where we go to our juvenile hall students, and we talk to them, try to provide them with some options for when upon their release, so that they don't go back to the lifestyle that they had fallen into prior to getting into juvenile hall. And that's incorporated a partnership that we have with Los Medanos. And that was actually by the request of some of the students in juvenile hall who asked that we bring someone from Los Medanos to talk to them about some of the options they have when they leave so that they don't return to that life. So there's a lot that we're doing, there's a lot that we want to do, and I think anything that we can do to try and support the youth in Antioch, we are always willing to partner in any other projects that the city is wanting to do. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and a round of applause to our panelists. We'll open it up to questions and answers, and what we'll do is we'll go down, start with the mayor, then myself, and if anyone in the community wants to ask a question, you're more than welcome, and then we'll kind of rotate that way, so everyone has a fair opportunity to ask a question. Mayor.
Yeah, as far as truancy, are you noticing summer's getting shorter and shorter?
It is.
And as summer gets shorter and shorter, there are those families that go off to visit with family and aren't coming back when school starts. Are you seeing larger numbers in that, and is that adding to the truancy rates?
You know, it is. And I think that it can certainly, and a big part of that, I think, is educating parents and making sure that they understand that, and this is something that I sit on our student attendance review board panel as often as possible in Antioch as well. We get a lot of parents who sometimes they aren't aware that even absences that they can call in or excuse count against them, meaning that our state considers unexcused and excused absences as the child's not being educated. So therefore, when we're talking about chronically absent students, everything counts, and that taking them out of school for a vacation or taking them out of school, even for, you know, if a relative is sick, they have a couple of days to kind of do that excused, but it's still going to count against that total number. And so any reason that a child is out of school is problematic. And so what we try to do in the discussions with parents and in those parent meetings is make sure that they understand that that is hurting their child academically, and that is something that can result in, you know, them having to appear before a judge, or those kind of issues escalating with respect to their child being educated. But yeah, I think it's an ongoing problem for a lot of reasons that parents do take their kids out of school, and it's, you know, we're always trying in that parent education part of it to make sure that they understand that if they're going to, or if they absolutely need to take their child out for more than a week or something like that, that they have to get those homework packets, they have to communicate with the school, they have to make up those days in some capacity at least to make sure their child doesn't fall behind.
And you said, I'm sorry, what was the percentage of truancy in Antioch?
You know, I know it's around 40%. It's on the County Office of Education website, and they actually list each district. A lot of our districts are around 46%, and I think that's about where Antioch is. You know, and that's kind of overall. That includes elementary, junior high school, and high school.
Thank you.
So you had mentioned that in terms of elementary schools, we were the highest in the.
In Contra Costa County is about the third highest in the state
For
as a
truancy.
county for elementary school truancy.
Okay.
So that's a pretty staggering, frightening figure.
And is there a comparison between Antioch and everywhere else in the
Yeah,
county?
yeah.
Where do we stack in?
And, Antioch and everywhere else. That I think would be in the County Office of Ed website as well. I don't know specifically for elementary school where Antioch would fall in that list. I know overall, that kind of 40-ish percentage number, I believe it's gonna be in the top, probably the top 5. But that being said, it's pretty even in terms of all of our school districts throughout the county. Unfortunately, we're pretty high everywhere in our overall truancy rates. So, you know, Antioch's just simply up there with everybody else.
Right. And so I just have
Yeah.
more for the gang. How many people are in the gang unit?
Right now we have 8 plus Corporal Hoffman, myself, and Sergeant Miles Carter.
Okay. And so in addition to staff, how much do we allocate for resources for the gang unit?
Well, I mean, some of the biggest problem is our gang unit is an ancillary duty unit.
Right.
So wherever somebody's working, whether they're working patrol or investigations, we're splitting our time between trying to do our normal work and then as much as we can towards the gang
Okay.
issues. So
So how much would, in this 8-member team, how much of their time is spent on gang issues?
I mean, it's
It
kind of
fluctuates?
hard. It's hard to calculate. Like somebody like myself and Corporal Hoffman, we did it by ourselves for a long time, and we dedicated a lot of time to it. I think that with the people that we have, it's a lot better. I think that you can see that in just the reduction in the violent crimes that we've had, especially with our partnership with the task force and running the wiretaps. Basically, by cutting the head off the snake, we're reducing the amount of kids that are being recruited into the gang. So I can't put a solid number on it. We're doing the best that we can.
Right.
I know it's our chief's goal to have a full-time, sort of a proactive unit that would be fully focused on that. And I mean, in 2008, I was on one of those teams. That's when I became a gang officer, and it's a tremendous thing to have because you have somebody that's dedicated, focused on that problem. They don't have to, worry about carrying a caseload or going to calls for service. But like I said, over the last probably 4 years now, with them increasing the amount of people on the gang unit and the time that we put in, our violent crime has reduced dramatically.
Right. And so maybe this from in your role and in your role, how much time do you spend on the how would you divvy up your,
Well, so
if you had to put a percentage to it?
So here's the thing about being a gang officer. You have to want to do it. You can't just be like, oh, I'm a gang officer. And I spend probably more of my free time on gang issues than I do my work time. I dedicate a lot of my work time to my work, and I dedicate a ton of my free time to the gang stuff. And just between like Corporal Hoffman and I in the last probably 3 or 4 years, we've testified in almost 100 gang-related cases, and those in themselves can take weeks to prosecute. And I know Rick does the same thing. A lot of his free time he spends on this problem.
Right.
Yeah, it's, you know, especially, you know, I would say the same thing, and especially sometimes even on a patrol level, it can be difficult to divvy up any, or a lot, if any, work time to gang problems. So for myself, it would be the same thing. It would be a lot of my free time or time after work is spent on, you know, working on gang cases or identifying gang members and things like that.
So, you know, part of what, so we're capturing information for the budget process. And so I think at least for me, what's important is there is nothing in this city that we do that doesn't have a monetary value, because at the end of the day, that's what we have to make numbers work. And so, so my questions come from that, is understanding how much we're dedicating in terms of budgetary costs to this issue at hand. So,
I think I can answer that.
Okay.
For you. I think the best way to have that question answered would be practically through the chief. We'll do some further analysis and research.
Okay, that'd be great.
Stuff, so.
Yeah, so forewarn them that I'm going to ask that question, that we, because it's important, I think, and it's important for public transparency that people understand how much we're investing in dealing, you know, with things that I would call nonsense, but at the end of the day, they're costing lives, they're creating problems in our community, and they're creating backflows over at the DA's office. So now I guess I have the same question for you. How much of your operating budget is well, all of your operating budget is dedicated for you specifically to juveniles, but how much of your caseload comes from Antioch?
So that's a great question. With respect to, and I think there's probably a lot of ways to answer that. With respect to the truancy cases, I would say probably at least half of our parent court is Antioch.
In comparison to the entire county?
Yeah, and I would say probably of our teen court, probably, that's a little tougher of a question, but a decent percentage. So, you know, and it's certainly one of the heaviest, I would say, on our teen court as well. So definitely, and I know we have a high percentage of youth as well in Antioch. It's, you know, we have a lot of students.
Right.
So that's part of it, and I know the folks over there work really hard and are very, you know, vigorous and do a great job following the cases. So when students are absent, they are on top of it and they do refer them. So that's another factor to consider. But certainly, there's a tremendously high number of cases. There's no question.
Wow. Questions?
I just have a quick comment on
Questions?
on the gang.
No, questions. Is it a question?
It's about the secret fix for the.
Just put a question mark
All
at the
right,
end.
put a question mark at the end.
Okay, it's a question mark. Okay. So if anybody doesn't know C-Click Fix for Antioch, you can report gang graffiti. I see the MOB. I've seen that, and I actually, it's on Lone Tree. I've seen it. So you can do it anonymous. Some people don't know. Just want to let you guys know.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am, and then sir.
For you, Laura, for LCAP and LCFF funding specifically for English language learners, foster youth, and low income, is there any way that you can somehow pull funding from that to support these young people that are ending up in the teen truancy courts?
That is a great question. And I know that from what I understand, I know the school district budgets are really, really tight right now. That's what I've been told. I do think it would be great to allocate some of those resources. I think that would be a good question also, maybe, for our school board, because I think they make those decisions. But I think it's a great point. Certainly, I think there's a need for resources to be put in that direction without doubt. Yeah.
So two quick questions, one for Corporal Hoffman. Have you seen any MS-13 activity in the area, infiltrating the city, anything like that?
You know, we did.
Not since, what year was the Deer Valley High shooting?
2012.
There was a subset that started, there's there's only maybe like 7 or 8 members. Well, they went over to the Deer Valley parking lot and shot a Norteño, and we decimated them after that. And we have not seen them back yet.
And my second question is for Assistant DA. On the parent court and the teen court, what percentage of parents show up to these hearings?
That's a great question too. We often, in terms of resources, a lot of the parents initially don't show up. But what we then do is we have ways that we try to personally serve them. So I have an investigator go out. I personally do home visits. I go with the child and welfare attendants liaison from the Antioch School District frequently. And we go out to houses. We go into houses. We talk to families. We talk to parents. We do face-to-face contact. We try to do as much as I will call them. We'll do anything we can to get the families in the courtroom. And the reason for that is when we actually get them to court, they do really well because they connect with our service providers. They get some of the supports that they need. A lot of times, our families are really desperate for all kinds of guidance, resources, mental health help. So our goal is just to get them in the door. I had a conversation with a parent actually yesterday who was talking to me about how she is desperate for, I guess she moved from a different county and she's desperate for a Head Start program out here in Antioch. She said, oh my gosh, if we had a Head Start program, I could get all my kids to school. So there's a lot of different things, that I hear in that capacity too, that I think could be helpful. But once we get them there, and we do try through various means, they usually do pretty well.
Is some of the cases where they're not showing up, is it like kind of like lack of transportation, instability in housing?
Great question. Yeah, sometimes it is lack of transportation. What I'll do is I'll tell a parent that, and my investigator will go out there and pick them up, bring them to court if they don't have transportation. So we try to address that problem. Some of our service providers will do the same thing. So we try to get that one off the table. Instability in housing is a big problem because we can't find them. We have a number of cases right now of families who are literally, they're going from house to house, staying with friends. They don't have a residence where we can actually find them. They literally have a different residence every 2 or 3 months. And a lot of times they won't even enroll the kids in school because there's sort of a shame factor too. Like, I don't want to enroll my child and then take them out again and enroll them someplace else. And they just are too overwhelmed to even get to that step. And so if they are enrolled, they'll be so concerned with these other issues that they won't even be taking the child when the child needs to go to school, or they can't pay for the gas, or they don't have someone to take them. So when we have a hard time tracking them, it usually is because they've changed addresses so many times, and we just simply cannot figure out where they are. And that's a huge, huge struggle. And specifically in Antioch, that is a pretty big problem.
2 questions. One, when we're talking truancy, so the definition is over 10% absenteeism.
So chronic absenteeism is missing 10% or more of the school year. The cases that we see by the time they get to like the court level they far exceed that.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at that as the number, and we're talking 46%, if my kid were to miss 3 days a month for the year, that would be truant.
Right.
Right.
Right. So those days add up pretty quickly.
Right.
Typically, the students that get taken before, there's several letters, there's a bunch of interventions at the school district level prior to getting any further than that. But yeah, even those days add up pretty quickly. But when you think of the school year, 10% is quite a few days by the end of the school year that student is missing.
Other quick question. I see graffiti that says BOA. And I always see it and think, man, somebody's advertising for Bank of America. It's graffiti, so I can't think, is there a gang related to that?
That would probably not be gang related. It's probably somebody's moniker that they use.
Just an individual's then.
To tag, yeah.
Okay.
And we see a lot of that.
Just an individual, okay. And then my last question would be, from all of you, from a program standpoint, if we were to create programs, do something, right? What are things that you could see council from a policy standpoint moving forward in a budget process to be able to help help you or help the youth of our community?
You know, just speaking from obviously I'm gonna have a certain perspective just being a police officer. And I know that a lot of the reduction as far as violence goes and as far as keeping the community safe goes that I've seen as a police officer and in my time being on the gang unit has been in the work that we've done as a gang unit, targeting gangs that have victimized communities. I mean, I have spoken on numerous occasions to people who live in these communities who have come up, to me or spoken to me on a personal level and said, thank you for what you guys have been doing because I can finally come outside or I can finally go to the store without, feeling like I'm gonna be victimized by this certain person. So from our perspective, I think that, we've been really excited at the prospect of possibly having some type of full-time proactive team that would be specifically geared towards targeting these, gang members and targeting these violent gangs and keeping the community safe. And I think if we do that and we have a team that's, not like myself and Sergeant Stenger, who we have a whole host of things that we have to do at work, and then on top of that we try to do gang work with it. If we just had a team that was specifically focused on just doing that, I think that would be a big help in reducing crime in those areas and ultimately making it safer for the families and especially the children.
And part of that would be getting into the schools as that unit with the kids. And
Specific to a unit that's doing that, and so
I
that
mean,
unit's getting involved, or a
yeah,
community
well,
resource officer?
Well, I mean, I would love to see school resource officers come back, but I think that's something that's gonna have to be worked out between the police department and the school district. I mean, I would love to see that. I think it's a tremendous value, but in the meantime, I think that if we had a full-time proactive unit, they could split time doing proactive police work, but also proactively being there on the school campuses, giving just presentations like this. I know, Federal Glover used to put on, and I don't know if he's still doing it, his gang symposiums. If we did stuff like that the unit could be involved in with getting the community out, because like she said, honestly, it's not the kids that are a problem, it's the broken home they're coming from. The alcoholism, the drug use, the, divorce rate, unfortunately, socioeconomically, a lot of that starts at home, and it bleeds into the kids, and it's a vicious cycle that does not stop. And I just think having just a unit out there that would be proactive police-wise and with the community, I think it would be awesome.
And I tend to believe that prevention, especially when we're dealing with youth, is what we should focus on, because this is the time when we can prevent them from entering the system and entering, this lifestyle of the gang stuff that we saw here today. So I think in terms of resources, in terms of making a city safe, community policing is incredibly valuable. And I think that, that's something that we can't sort of afford to do in Antioch, and that's been the case for a while. I also think that a lot of, for example, there's some other models that have been really successful in other places. An example is I know there's school districts who actually look at they red flag, okay, who are our most chronically absent students on a consistent basis, and each school has a team, and they have a team of about 3 people, and this has been funded through city budgets. For example, Colorado does this, and they have a team at each school site that takes on these students, kind of like the students who are missing the most school. And they specifically go to each one of those homes. They talk to the parents. They see what the needs are. They see what is going on. What can we provide you? How can we help you? They have parenting classes. There's models where they have parenting classes at every single school site that are available, and they offer those to parents free of charge. And those types of programs where you're really getting it at the ground level and saying, okay, in 3rd grade and 4th grade, who are the students who were missing 50 days of school? okay, this is the team that's gonna go out and see what's going on, because I can guarantee you that that child who's missing 50 days of school, something is going so wrong that that's the child that we're gonna see entering the system later on. And so preventing that crime prevents, you know, all of these things that then our police officers have to go out and deal with. If we can get it from the front end, we're gonna have a lot less work to do at the back end.
Right. Yeah, that you had mentioned earlier. At a certain grade level, it's almost, not that it is, it's almost too late.
Yeah.
And so, to your point, we have to do the enforcement side because we have to keep our streets safe. But from your vantage point, we have to do some intervention because it's just a vicious cycle that keeps going and going and going. We look at recidivism rates. It hasn't. The reason we're dealing with Prop 109, Prop 49, this, that, and the other, that as an example, my wife works with, is because just incarcerating people didn't work.
Right.
And
Right.
so we have to do things just a little different now, and some of it's enforcement, and some of it's going to have to be intervention. And I'm not sure we've done a lot of intervention, but we just have to do something. And so I appreciate all those perspectives, but we're going to have to find a balance, I think, as a council. Johnny.
Quick question, you talked about collaboration. Are there certain organizations or programs that you guys are in collaboration with and working with so that hopefully you don't have to deal with them at the next level? Are there programs that you've already identified that you're in partnership with?
Is that for me or for
Or
these guys?
either police department or yourself at the DA?
I mean, we've partnered with, like, ex-gang member, like, there was a group that was doing that for a while. We've really kind of fallen away from it, and we need to do more of it.
Yeah. And we try to partner with a lot of our agencies. As I mentioned, some of the organizations, Family Justice Center, the Cope organization, Lincoln Center, the school districts, we try to partner with anyone and everyone we can. Because I think, to be honest, I think that preventing violence in a community is it's a community effort. You know, I mean, everybody kind of has to participate in that mission, and everyone has to be on board. And when I was talking about the 1,000 Strong program, that was something initiated by the mayor's office, for example, but the school district had to participate.
The
Commerce,
Urban League.
The Urban League, yeah. I mean, everybody kind of had to say, let's kind of figure out how can we support our youth as a community, and that takes so many partners in order to, okay, where can these kids intern? How are we going to pay for those internships? But at the end of the day, those are our youth and this is our community, so that's going to help everybody, right? So that's the idea behind a lot of that work, but I think partnership is incredibly important.
Our internal collaboration with REACH, our REACH program, juvenile diversion, so you can talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, tell us a little bit. Do you want to share?
You're much
Because
better.
sorry to put you on the spot, but
No problem. So to answer the gentleman's question directly is, we have a REACH program, which is headed by Mickey Marchetti. And it's a juvenile diversion program where we get certain juveniles and certain incidents or contacts with juveniles, just like truancy or, status offender incidents or contacts that we get with them, like they would be in the park after hours, or Antioch has a curfew. So when we come into contact with juveniles like that, they try and identify deeper-seated problems, and in like what most of we talked about today, a multi-jurisdictional, multifaceted approach to find solutions and either intervene or prevent, we divert them to those contacts and keep them out of the juvenile justice system to our REACH program, which is a battery of counselors, and they have different resources available to them, and they try to identify which resources best fit the juvenile's profile and their behavior, and then steer them towards or marry them to those programs and see how that works. So in studying and reading studies with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, they come up with programs and see what best practices are out there, what's more evidence-based that has a success rate, and bring those programs to Antioch and steer these juveniles towards the REACH program so that they can stay out of the justice system.
right. How many
And keep them out of juvenile.
how many children do we serve through REACH?
It's quite a few, and it's becoming more and more as we get better at identifying problems or issues that are trending and then steer them towards our REACH program. So to give you a hard number, it'd be kind of difficult for me right now, but it's significant. They do a lot of work over there.
And Lamar, Mayor, and we actually just expanded that REACH program also. In years past, somebody would not be referred to REACH unless a juvenile was cited, so they read some type of citation or they're arrested. Now we've just expanded it so they can be referred to REACH without a citation or without an arrest. So say an officer goes to a home where a parent or guardian called because the child wasn't going to school or was stealing stuff from a parent, something like that. Well, if the officer doesn't arrest the juvenile or cite the juvenile, the officer can just refer that juvenile to REACH directly. We just implemented a system to do that, and that actually just started within this week.
So, and no, we pay for REACH, if I remember correctly. The city.
The PD pays a portion of REACH, I believe.
City, police department budget overall pays a portion of the REACH program?
I'm pretty certain.
Okay.
And the school district does as
And the
well.
school district does the other end? Okay. So is there a so I guess it could be viewed as if our theory is, well, if you're chronically absent or if you're cited or that you may be on your way to to gang activity, can it be viewed as a gang intervention program, or does it have a
It can be if that's, and that's one of the good parts about having officers and supervisors out there that wear that hat to be a part of a gang task force and identify and flesh out those issues on the front end. And if that is a particular problem that surfaces in a juvenile, that can be addressed in our REACH program. And it all it's community based.
Right.
So home visits are huge. So in getting the parents involved. And that's where REACH kind of leverages their power in the involvement of the parents, folding in the students, and then having some connectivity to the schools. Teachers, staff, probation officer that might be at the school. Once again, it keeps them out of the juvenile justice system, the criminal justice system. It's community based. And if they can deal with or have a counselor that appeals to that juvenile and talks to them about the gang issues that they have, then that's more resources and more training and experience that they're bringing to the REACH program. They're bringing different counselors and education and training to that program all the time. And those are things that they're looking to capitalize on.
Good. Okay. Well, we are at almost 50, so we're a little over time, but we appreciate all of you for participating in the community. Were there other questions? No more? Okay, good. And with that, we'll end our last session. Remember, March 21st is our Parents, Teachers, and Youth Forum, so we'll be doing the 21st at 6 p.m. We believe it's going to be at the Nick Rodriguez Center. And the mayor and I will continue to do some more of this exploratory work to kind of learn what's out there and see how we can better serve and address the community's needs. So thank you, everybody.
And I just want to say thank you to the police officers that are here, the community policing that you guys are doing now, getting out in the community. Just in Sycamore alone, I had a citizen come up to me and say, they saw police officers